All right, so welcome to the beginners games lecture. And my name is Aviv. I'm going to be here for the coming several weeks, so I'll be doing these if they happen again. And today we are going to start with Arjun's game on chess.com. Right, Arjun? And let's see the opening. So Arjun starts with d4 and his opponent plays g6, which already tells us that he's going to lean towards one of those modern defenses, right? Or King's Indian defense, or maybe something else. So many times d4 players like to play the move c4, just as if black played knight f6, but you decided to play e4. So it's like almost like you transpose right into the regular modern defense that starts with e4, g6, and then d4. So bishop g7. Here again, white has a bunch of moves and many of them are possible, and hard to say that one is necessarily better than the other. You played knight f3. When I used to play chess, which I don't anymore for some reason, but I used to play knight c3 almost automatically. And I noticed that a lot of players play knight c3 because it's kind of a flexible move in the sense that they don't commit their g1 knight yet. They say maybe under some circumstances I'm going to play, for example, f4. So for example, if you don't intend to push your c-pawn to here anyways, so maybe you want to consider playing this move first, and then let's say the opponent plays d6, and then again, I'm just saying it as an option. It doesn't have to, not the only one. You can still play knight f3 here and it's fine. But like f4 is an interesting, very interesting choice. And then to play knight f3. The possibility of building a really strong center, and I really like it because sometimes it interferes with my opponent's ideas. If he wants to play knight, for example, this knight coming, let's say, to d7, then I like to push my pawn, my e-pawn, to e5. Okay, so let's go back to the game. As we said in the game, knight f3 happens, still fine. h6. Now, I've been playing chess, I've been around chess for over 30 years, but never in my life have I seen this position before. This is a brand new position for me. Now, it could transpose into something that I've seen, yes, but right now it looks like Greek. Why the move g6, h6 was played, I have no clue. Is he trying to prevent some piece from coming to g5? Maybe, but there seemed to be no urgency at all to play a move like this. So, of course, if I'm white, I'm kind of happy to see it. And already I have an idea in mind. Notice that I'm thinking to myself, okay, and Arjun, since this is your game, let's see if you can help me a little bit. When you look at this position, and you pretend that you're the black player, even though you're white, where do you think the black king is going to end? Do you think he's going to be happy in the center? No. Okay. So do you think he's going to go left and castle queenside, or is he going to go right and castle kingside? When you see all the... Looks like it, right? Because to castle the other way, he's going to have to get rid of a lot of pieces, right? He has to let his queen out, his bishop out, all those guys, this guy, this guy, this guy, all those, he has to let them all out, and it has to mean pushing some pawn. And even then, since white is most likely to castle the other way, he's going to castle kingside this way, then it's going to be very easy for white to attack, right? If black chooses to put his king on this side. So, we conclude that normally in these positions, the black king goes this way. He wants to castle here, right? Of course, not right now, there's a knight there. So, with this in mind, I'm thinking to myself, okay, if he wants to castle here and he already played the move h6, how can I make his life harder? How can I punish him? So what do you think would be a good setup to try to punish the opponent a little bit? And again, very, very good and absolutely correct. I want to put my bishop on e3, like so. And I want to put, my next move is going to be queen up from here and here. And we know that the queen and bishop on the same diagonal like this is called a battery in chess. You don't have to remember it, just to mention it. When the queen and the bishop are going to be lined up against this pawn, right now this pawn is very well protected by a rook, by a knight, and by a bishop. But this knight wants to see the light of day, right? He wants to come out someday. And if the king wants to castle, then he will change places with the rook, but then the rook will be missed defending the pawn. Can you already anticipate that? Do you guys understand what I'm saying? With a queen and bishop on this long diagonal? So let's say, for example, first of all, maybe you can play knight f6, but after knight f6, maybe I can play e5. And already the poor knight on f6 is going somewhere he didn't mean to go. So that is one thing that can happen. Okay, a second thing is that we can just play knight c3, normally defend the pawn, and still the queen and bishop are going to be lined up against this poor h6 pawn. So that was interesting. Okay, so in the game, knight c3, again a normal move, nothing terrible about that. Definitely a very playable move. e6. I really don't like this move. Who can help me and tell me why? Don't be afraid to be wrong, by the way, but okay, yes.
d5.
Say again?
d5.
Because white plays the move d5?
Yeah.
Okay, but before I even look for a move for white, like I didn't even think of a move for white, but already as soon as I saw the move, already something like my instinct said like, I don't like it. Why? For example, let me put it this way, had black played this move, then I would have liked it. Then I would have said, look, how he is doing things harmoniously. He is doing it like everything works together. Notice, this pawn is controlling this square, the g pawn is controlling f5, the d pawn is controlling e5, nothing is in the way, everything is controlling something, and they're working together, just like a team. When you don't do that, when you do this, then notice how the e pawn and the g pawn are attacking the same square, but e5 is very, very weak. And more so, look at the dark squares. Look at all the dark squares, f8, e7, d6, f6, all those dark squares. They are very, very weak because of that pawn. What was the sense of putting this pawn here if you already developed your bishop this way? You don't have to let the bishop out. So compromising the dark squares is not a good idea. I'm against it. Okay, now, again, I'm thinking to myself, all right, in this kind of a position, what do I want to do as white? Now, in the game, I know that you played the move bishop c4, and I'm not saying it's a terrible move, but in my opinion, I think that I have a very, very good long-term plan. And we already mentioned it before. I want to start with the move bishop, probably to e3, maybe even to f4, but e3 seems to be a really good square for the bishop. And now in this position, my plan is to go queen to d2, and again pile up against this pawn. Make life very, very difficult for the king on this pawn. Notice that I haven't castled with my king as white, which means maybe I'm going to castle queenside. If I do that, then I can afford to send those pawns, the h and g pawns, up the board to attack. So for example, I don't think it's so easy for black to make a move. Let's say that he makes a move like knight to e7. I assume that's why he played e6, to bring the knight there. Now I'm going to play queen d2. And now we see part of the plan. That was something that I was talking about before, and here it's even more obvious. Can black now comfortably castle?
No.
No. Why not?
Because he loses the h pawn.
Exactly. The queen and the bishop are already lined up to take the pawn. All of a sudden, castling has become a little bit of a problem for black. He can afford to castle, it's a legal move, but it's going to cost him the pawn. Once that rook moves away from here after the castling, he's going to be on f8. Then my bishop is just going to munch on that pawn and is going to be very happy. I'm going to do it for sure. So black has to do something that he didn't really mean to do. For example, maybe push h5, maybe push g5, but either one of those moves is making a big weakness. And again, I want you to remember, white has not castled kingside. He hasn't committed his king this way. Most likely he's going to castle the other way. So for example, let's imagine something like, let's say this, and let's say white castles, just to give an example. And now, of course, black can also castle. When you look at the position, before you even look for moves, just by an optical look, which king seems happier here? How many of you think it's the black king? How many think the black king is happier? How many think it's the white king that's happier? Everybody agrees. Of course, you don't even have to be a strong chess player. Just by looking at it, you say, wait a minute. The king is supposed to castle where he has a fortress of pawns who is close to it and is guarding it and is hard to get to. Well, I think that the white structure really fulfills that statement. The black one doesn't. Already I can see how maybe I can use my h and g pawns to create a big harassment. Like maybe already at some point my h pawn is ready to move up the board and play h4. Uncomfortable. Very, very uncomfortable for black. He is going to get under an attack, and that's a very good way to start a chess game if you're white. So again, We'll go back to this position. And again, understand that the urgent move is to develop the bishop, develop the queen, start an attacking position, get ready to bring the king this way, and push those pawns to attack. You thought to yourself, I'm assuming, Arjun, that you were thinking, I want a castle kingside, therefore I need to develop my f1 bishop, right? That was your thinking? That's why you played bishop c4? Or partly? Okay. But you understand how maybe bishop e3 and queen d2 would have been more to the point, right? Okay. So bishop to c4, and he plays the move c6. Again, as soon as I look at this move, it's like if I'm looking at the board, and let's say I'm looking away, let's say I pretend I never looked at the board before, I'm looking at it again, one thing immediately comes to me, immediately strikes me as, oh, what is it? What is the most obvious thing in the position? Something that kind of screams at you when you look at the position. What do you think it may be? Yes?
Black hasn't developed yet.
Bad development by black, exactly, and to complement it, what's really weak in the black army, in the black area?
The black squares.
The dark squares, exactly. Look at them. Starting from this one on c7, d6, e7, f6, f8, even e5, they are all very, very weak. And our first instinct is, how are we going to take advantage of it? Now, when he makes a move like e6 and then c6, he is telling us something. What is he telling us? He has a move in mind. He wants to play a certain move, yes? D5. He cannot be more declarative, right? He cannot be more obvious to say, I played e6, I played c6, I'm ready to take my d pawn and push it up the board. Now, how can we play a move that does two things at once? A, interferes with the plan of playing d5 comfortably. Second of all, try to start taking some advantage of the fact that the dark squares are not very strong. What do you guys think? Arjun.
D5.
Say again?
D5.
Yes, one of those moves is indeed to play the move d5. A very, very interesting move. Gaining a lot of space. And, well, let me tell you what. If I get to push this pawn further to d6, that pawn is going to be a real, like a bone in the throat, right? It's like a thorn in your side. It's like something that is like really bothering you. And yes, if I get to push it, but what is your alternative? If you take it, okay, then I'll take it. I still have a pawn, I still want to push it. If you take again and my knight takes, I would rather be white any time of the day for this kind of a position. Look, my knight is superb and untouchable in the center, and it has a bishop to support it. I'm just ready to castle and bring my rook to the e file with a big attack. And you see this pawn on d7, how do we call this kind of pawn?
A backward.
A backward and isolate both, you're right. It's isolated because it has no pawns on the adjacent file to help him. And it's backwards because it's going to be awfully hard to get it to d5. Do you see black going d5 in this game? Only if white is superbly cooperative, right? If white is like the friendliest Christmas friend, right? He's going to let you do it. Otherwise, forget it. So this is tremendous, tremendous for white. So d5, my goodness, what a move. I want to hear another move that has something to do with this idea. Taking advantage of things here. Yes?
E5.
Also interesting to play, e5, yes. And of course here black has to be super careful, because if I get one free move as white, my knight from c3 is going to jump to e4. Look at this, I'm showing with the arrows. If my knight comes to here, and then of course he wants to visit the d6 square, then the black position is near bankruptcy, right? Like really, really bad. So maybe in this position black will have to play d5. And of course I know that I can take the pawn en passant here, I can take it, but probably no. Probably I'm just going to just put my bishop back on that square, and now this pawn on e5 is extremely annoying. It makes this bishop on g7 look really, really weak. And again, I'm going to use my pawns on the king side to try to attack the king. Okay, but d5 that you suggested, Arjun, I really, really like even better, I have to tell you. Okay, in the game you played the move bishop e3. And what is the big drawback of this move now? Well, this is the plan, right? You want to play queen d2, but what is the problem with it? What can now black do? He was preparing for it. He did it in the game, yeah. The problem with this move is that now black can play this move, and he feels like a spring coming out, right? Like a spring that was pushed, 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 and all of a sudden it sprung out. It's like he burst, and he gained space. He hits the bishop with a tempo. It hits your center. right? That pawn hits your center, you have to get rid of the e-pawn. So you have to say to yourself, wow, something really, really funny happened here. Now, when you face something like this, you have to say, okay, maybe I made a mistake, maybe I shouldn't have allowed d5, but now I have to react to it properly. If you take and he takes, you are doing him a favor. Why? Why, by taking this pawn, you're doing black a favor? I think that there are like even two reasons for it. Who thinks that they might know? Don't be afraid to be wrong, by the way. Okay, Arjun, you want to try?
He pushes your bishop back.
Well, that's going to happen anyways, right? Whatever happens. My bishop cannot stay on c4, right? So whether I capture with my e-pawn, or if I move the bishop immediately, the bishop has to go back. Agreed? Yes. Now I'm saying, why should the bishop go back immediately and leave the pawn on e4? Why shouldn't I trade? Why should I just first move my bishop, not trade? Yes?
Because if he takes your pawn on e4, your knight gets really strong.
Which gets really strong? Okay, in the game you took, and he took. Okay, he took like this, which is also, I guess, playable. But I would have taken like this. And what good thing now happened for black? What does he have now that he didn't have before? A small thing, yes.
He got a center pawn.
Yes, but yes, the bishop on c8, if you look at this position, and I would have asked you here, what is black's worst piece? Absolute worst minor piece. All of you would have to say that this is this bishop on c8. It has to be this. Hey, it's the only one who can't make a legal move at all, period. All the others, good or bad, at least can make a legal move. This bishop cannot make any legal moves. What's more, it's going to take a lot of effort to help it make a legal move. Even after this was played, this bishop is still looking funny. Yeah, he can make one move, but that's just about it. Now, by taking and allowing him to take like this, wow, this bishop was just liberated. All of a sudden, he was somewhere in the basement behind a lot of covers, and all those covers are moved, and the big basement door is like squeaking out, and he sees the light of day. That's not what we want to allow our opponents to do, sorry, no. So that's one main reason. Also, when you trade this pawn, I want you to think of it. Look at the e-pawn, and then look at the black e-pawn that can recapture back. Which one of them is better, this one or this one? All of you will say the e4 pawn, right? It's more active, it's in the center, it has more space. So why do I want to trade this guy for this guy? Let me pretend that I just moved the bishop, and for now I'll just move it here, doesn't really matter. Let's say I play bishop to here, just as a move. And already you can see that black is left with the same headache that he had before. The bishop on c8 is stuck. Let's pretend that he takes to trade anyways, and I take back. Well, what do we see? We see that I did trade my e-pawn, but I didn't trade it for the black e-pawn, I traded for the black d-pawn. That's an even exchange. That d5 pawn was a decent pawn. I don't mind trading it for this one. So that is a very good trade for me. And look at the bishop, still stuck and very passive on c8. My knight, by the way, improved. It went to the center. So, the long story short here, in this position it's better off to leave the e-pawn, which is protected, and not trade. Okay, so traded, and he for some reason decided to take with the c-pawn. I would have taken with the e-pawn for sure, because I'd love to see my c8 bishop come out. And now you played here. Again, it's kind of funny that every move I have a comment, but sometimes the position requires it. You have to say to yourself, okay, my bishop is being attacked. I have several moves to choose from. One is to go where you went, to here. The other one is here, and then two more moves on the diagonal. And I have to say that if I have to choose a move in this position, most likely I would either give the check to gain the tempo, and maybe at some point I would either be willing to trade it for the bishop or the knight, or I will go all the way back to e2. Keep it as a defensive piece. Because when I go to b3, I'm thinking to myself, how am I ever going to crack open this very strong wall on d5? Do I have any resources? Do I have an e-pawn that I can hit the center? No, I already traded it. That d5 is like the strongest point on the board for black. I don't want to have my pieces look at it, because there's no way they can crack it, right? Imagine that you had a hammer about this size, and you have a concrete wall about this size. It's going to be very hard, right? So it's a bad war. I don't want to be there. So, for example, I can gain a tempo for my development. I'll play a check. If he plays bishop d7, heck, even if I trade for it, you know, then it's better off. But again, like I said, The other choice is to play bishop to e2. Now the bishop is a bit quiet, but later on in the game, maybe I can do something with it. In the meantime, black has a very bad bishop he needs to solve on c8. So on we go with the game, sorry. So we have bishop b3, a6. Okay, not the most urgent move. It seems like developing the knight and trying to castle might be more urgent. And now you castled, and I'm a little puzzled by this because what do we say? What do you think is the most logical move in this position? Yes? Queen d2. No question about it. Queen d2. It's very hard for me to say that I would have played any other move here, but queen d2. This move is very, very tricky. I don't tell my opponent if I'm going to castle kingside or queenside. It's always nice if you can keep your opponent in the dark. When he sees this move, he says, wait a minute, is he going to castle this way or that way? That's very nice to keep your opponent guessing, especially when sometimes he gets it wrong, and then he gets very demoralized. He gets really sad about, I thought he's going to do this, and he ended up doing that. Instead of just castling, it's like, oh, I know. His king is here. That means he cannot attack me anymore. And besides, what do we know? We want the queen and bishop battery to be all over that little tiny h-pawn. We love it. We just love it. When this, now let's say, for example, he plays his knight out somewhere. Let's try to play knight f6, because now maybe I want to bring my knight to g4, and I'm going to attack this bishop and protect the pawn. Now maybe I will play a little move like maybe h3, not let the knight go there. And again, notice how hard it is for black to castle. His h-pawn is hurting. So again, he needs to play something like g5 or h5. We already discussed that much in the beginning of the lesson. It's a weakening move that he probably is going to regret later. But how else to castle? It's going to be very, very hard to castle otherwise. So queen d2 was very, very good here. Okay, so in the game we castled. He decided to play b5. Okay, notice again that all this pawn mobility just makes his bishop on c8 look really, really silly. Even if he gets to here or here, that bishop is a very, very bad piece. That is something that as white we should keep in mind. Okay, so a3. Now, I'm assuming that you were really worried that he might play the move b4. Was that your concern? Maybe? But you have to say to yourself, is he really benefiting from b4? Or is he, or maybe he is not. So for example, let's say that you are trying to provoke it. I'm going to play a4. And I'm dying for him to trade, because that's going to be very useful for me. So let's pretend that he says no, and he does this. And I will move my knight. Let's even say to a2, just for the sake of attacking the pawn on here. And let's pretend that he wants to defend it, because he doesn't feel like losing it. And now I can use my c-pawn. Either I'm going to play c3, or maybe even I will play the move c4 to try to open up the position. And my pieces are active. I have to say that most likely I will play the move c3. Really, really like it. Now my bishop can swing back to another diagonal or fresh diagonal, and my knight is going to come back with power because, well, it can. After you take and my knight takes, and my knight can just get better. So really, really like this for white. Okay, you decided to play a3. He played knight e7. Queen to e2. Okay, reasonable move, connecting the rooks. Again, d2 is my favorite move. d2, and again, the problem is how to castle. Okay, now knight f5, very, very good. And you decided to play rook d1. So I'm assuming that you were saying I cannot move my bishop, because if I move my bishop, then maybe he is going to take my pawn on d4, right? Well, there's some truth to it, but on the other hand, maybe it's not so simple. Let's, for example, say that I played this move. Just because I really, really like my bishop. I really think that if this knight gets to take the bishop, then black's bishop on g7 is going to have extra powers. So let's say I move. And now, I'm assuming you're thinking just takes, right? And takes. And bishop takes. And now, for a moment, it looks like white just lost a pawn, and he's very sad. Black is ready to castle and all that. But what can white play in this position? Say again, please. You mean the white? This knight to move back? To where? To here? Yeah. I don't want to go backwards. I gave up a pawn. When you give up a pawn, you have to think to yourself, how can I be aggressive, right? If you give up a pawn and then you have to go backwards, chances are that your game is very bad. And I can tell you sometimes you have to do it, but here you have something. And somebody already said it, taking on d5, knight takes d5. Well, as you can see, that pawn seems to be attacking it, but the queen here is pinning it to the king, so forget about it. There is no way to take that. Very nice. Agreed? This is very, very nice. Okay, of course, black can castle, the game will go on, but I can assure you already that white got his pawn back, and all his pieces developed, all the black pieces are still here. This bishop on d4 is very, very vulnerable. Imagine what's going to happen when my rook is coming to d1, attacking the bishop, and the queen all the way behind it. Imagine a rook on this beautiful d1 square. Very hard for black. So, probably in this position, if black is smart, probably he's not going to take the pawn. And if he's not going to take the pawn, then that means that we could afford to move our bishop and save it from that evil knight. Now we control the e5 square. Maybe we can play bishop e5 or knight to e5 at some point, and we can always defend our pawn whenever we need to. So, okay, in the game, we played rook a d1, and the opponent just castled. I have to say that I would not have missed the chance to get rid of this bishop. This bishop can become very good. In a second, he's going to go to f4, and on f4, it's a good piece. It's doing a lot. It's in the center, king side, queen side. It's a very smart piece. So my knight would just take it. Get rid of it, and then that makes this bishop look stronger. Okay, so in the game, like I said, castles and queen d2. Well, the idea of queen d2 was available far before, right? A long time ago before. And now after queen d2, he's probably going to take our bishop on e3. So let's not allow it, and let's protect our bishop. This would have been a very nice move. Notice how everything is protected. Now I can afford to move, just like before, I can afford to move my bishop. And now I'm controlling this beautiful square on e5. Most likely, either my knight or my bishop can land there whenever I need to. This gives me at least a decent game. Okay, so queen d2, king h7. Okay, why? I don't see why. First of all, the knight is now protecting it too, and the bishop is protecting it. Second of all, like I said, I would just take this bishop with the knight because that bishop could be good. So he decided to play this. Knight e2. Okay, again, not a bad plan, because right now, when I'm looking at this bishop on b3, and I'm looking at this knight, they're not doing a whole lot. They are very, very weak. So the only way to do something is by moving the knight, repositioning it to another position, to here, and maybe pushing the c-pawn and getting my bishop back into the game. Otherwise, it's going to sleep forever on the diagonal. But I don't want to lose my bishop. I want to first save my bishop. That plan is good, but first save the bishop. Okay, so knight e2, bishop d7. That bishop is going to be bad forever. Knight to g3. Again, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but once again, I don't want to let him take this bishop, even though in the game I don't think he took it. But I want to preserve it, so I would save it first, then bring my knight to g3. That will be okay. He played here, and the knight took. What a surprise. Why did he take the knight instead of the bishop? We will never know. I think that this is just not a very wise trade. Now, we have two ways to capture. And I know that in the game you capture with the f-pawn. What do you think is the better way? Do you think the f-pawn is the best way, or is it the h-pawn? What do you guys think? Try to think of what are the advantages and disadvantages of each capture. In my mind, and I may be wrong, but I don't think that I'm wrong, I think that taking with the h-pawn would have been a better choice. Now why? Mainly because I think that in the game, when you capture like this, okay, you take away from the center, so this pawn might be missed in the center later on. And also, I don't think that I can do anything on the f-file. I think that my f-file is well protected for black, and I don't think I can do something about it. I think that if I would have taken with the h-pawn, like so, now I think that I have all kinds of attacking ideas. Namely, maybe I can push my g-pawn, and maybe even twice. So for example, let me try to throw in an idea. I'm not saying it's the best variation, okay, but just to throw in some idea. Let's say black plays here, I play here. Let's pretend black played rook c8. Oops, not this move. Rook c8. I'm not saying it's the best move. I'm just trying to show you like a possible line. And now I want to play the move g3. What is my idea? My idea is to play king to g2 and bring the rook over to h1 for the attack on the h-file. Do you guys understand that? I see an open h-file, I see my rook here on f1 very sleepy, and I want to bring my king up here and bring the rook over. Those two pawns are going to be great participants in the attack against the king side. Right now he cannot not easily play the move h5, for example, because of this pawn. I really like white's position here. I really think that in this position it's going to be very, very hard. Maybe he can play something like knight a5, and then maybe I will play king here. Let's pretend that he plays knight here. Just pretend. I'm not saying it's the best, but maybe pretend. And maybe I can even take it. Okay, and again, maybe black can get too much with his bishop. I don't know yet. It's interesting to think about it, but I think that white can hold, and I think that rook to h1 is going to be a real big problem against this. As a matter of fact, maybe I can already play this move, like taking here, maybe. And if you even think of taking, then rook h1. How to defend that bishop on h6? I don't know. Doesn't look good. Maybe you can play g5, but I can take it. I can take it, and then I can take on h6. You see, like for example here, I'm going to go check. And after this, and now you can see that the queen is all over the bishop. So I'm just going to play something like check. And when you take, I'm going to play knight takes pawn, double check. And my next move is knight takes queen. And we can go home with a big smile on our face, right? Because we're probably most likely going to win this game. Agreed? Looks good? Okay, great. So, yeah, this is very, very unfortunate from black's point of view. So that's why in this position, in view of this plan of taking with the pawn and then advancing those pawns, advancing the king, putting the rook here, I have a chance to attack on the h-file, especially with my queen and bishop already prepared for that task. Very, very good. Okay, in the game we played indeed f takes g3, knight c6, pawn c3, knight e7. Again, he wants to bring the knight to f5, but in this position it's easy to kick it. I think he would have done better to maybe play the move knight a5, hitting this bishop, and if the bishop moves or save itself, then possibly knight c4, hitting the queen and the bishop. I think that this would have been a much better continuation for black than what he did. So knight e7, knight e5. Okay, a decent move. Of course, black isn't very interested in taking with the bishop because then his dark squares are going to be horrible. So knight f5. Okay, now, my question to you, Arjun, if you had this position one more time, what move, would you play anything different or you would still play knight e5? What seems to be a little maybe more urgent? Because I don't see how he's stopping knight e5, right? It's going to be really, unless he wants to bring the knight back to c6, but then you can just keep playing useful moves. So what move do you think white should play in this position? I have a move in mind. I'm not 100% sure it's the best, but I think it feels right.
Bishop c2.
Maybe, but then knight f5, I'm not sure I want to take it. In other words, if I bring the bishop from here, and he plays knight f5, let's try it out. Let's say bishop here, knight f5, and now I have to make a decision. Either I move my bishop, or I capture. I don't really want to capture because I'm starting to really like this bishop. It's really starting to feel really good on this long diagonal. On the other hand, I'm not sure I want to lose this bishop. So maybe I will play here. So even this position seems to be quite playable. I really, really like it. Maybe black will have to play knight d6 at some later point and try to play knight e4. Right now he can't, of course, my bishop is here. White has a better position. Again, look at the bishop on d7. It's like a prisoner in jail.
So,
Really, really bad.
so whose turn is it?
Right now it's black to move.
Man, I always guess the black.
Yeah, but I think that it's really hard to suggest something useful for black. I really like white's position, fundamentally. I can think of a lot of useful moves here from white's point of view.
Right, it is.
But again, to go back to this position just for a moment, after notice the opponent played knight here. What do you think he is saying? Where is this knight heading? Well, we kind of know where it's heading. What square is he going to land on soon? Say it.
F5.
Yes. And on f5, it's a pretty good piece, right? At least for a moment. Can I do something about it? Can I do something? How can I stop him? Yes.
G4.
Yeah. Once again, this move can prove to be a very annoying move if you are the black player. Because this move is doing a lot of damage. It doesn't let you play h5 ever. So this is always going to be kind of a weakness, because if you ever play h5, I just take it. And in the meantime, the knight is not coming to its optimal square of f5. He just made this move with the only reason to come here, and you're telling him, nah, no, stay. That is always annoying to see if you are trying to get your piece somewhere and the opponent is preventing it. Okay, so let's continue with the game. After knight here, knight e5, knight f5, knight takes d7. Now Arjun, here you're going to get really scolded by me. You know what that means? I'm going to really yell at you. Not really yell at you, but like do this to you. Because when I'm looking at the knight and I'm looking at the bishop, I know you might have heard two bishops, right? You say, oh, if I have two bishops, that's going to be great. But when you look at the black bishop on d7, does he impress you?
No.
Do you look at the bishop on d7 and say, oh my God, that's the bishop that's going to mate me? Yeah? No. Exactly the opposite. I look at the bishop on d7 and I'm thinking, dude, you're in jail. And you're not getting out of jail. There is no way to get the bishop, even if it was a bug house game. If I could just pick up that bishop and put it somewhere, where am I going to put it? There's no legal way to get it out of that chain. Look at all the black pawns. The a6 pawn, the b5 pawn, the d5 pawn, and the e6 pawn. They all have one thing in common. They all keep this bishop on d7 prisoner. And he's not going to be able. And that knight on e5, sitting pretty in the center, and it's almost like, it's not like a teasing knight. It's almost saying to the bishop, take me, capture me. And black says, no, I don't want to capture you because I have to have this bishop. If I give you this bishop and put a white pawn here, my position is going to look like Swiss cheese. All the dark squares are going to look horrible. So that's another reason. It's like a good knight and a bad bishop. We do not want to trade our good pieces for bad pieces. Now, we know that right now the bishop on e3 may not be the best piece in the world, but if I brought it here, let's say, away from the range of the knight, what will be my next move? Potentially. What move do I have now on my list of ideas? Because I don't like this knight on f5, right? The knight on f5 is kind of annoying. It's like the best black piece right now. So what can I do to it? How can I harass it? By playing the move g4. Now g4 is begging to be played. So let's say if black plays, let's say some move, and I'm going to go bam, bam. The knight has to go back. I really start, again, with every move, I'm starting to like more and more the white position. He's attacking, he has more space, his pieces are in more valuable squares. The only piece that doesn't do much is the bishop on b3, but rest assured that in like one move, let's say this knight goes back, and guess who's coming to dinner? The bishop is ready. The bishop goes to c2, and he's already on the diagonal. Now I have ideas like maybe pushing my h-pawn, like h4 and then h5, completely weakening this whole structure. Now white is sitting pretty, and I would, if I had this position with white and I didn't win my game, I would be extremely disappointed because I would feel that I have a great position here. So g4 is my favorite move. Or rather, prepare g4, move my bishop. First I want to preserve this bishop. If I play g4 immediately, he will just take my bishop. And I kind of like my bishop. And especially I like it on f4. So, okay, knight takes d7. Are you going to play knight d7 next game? In a position like this? What?
I don't think so.
Just I don't think so? How about certainly not? Certainly not. The knight is much better than the bishop, believe me. So, of course he took, and then bishop c2, and then he took on e3, okay, and queen takes. All right, so we have traded two pieces, and I think that white traded two of his favorite pieces for black's less favorite pieces, and therefore the position is now kind of, I think it's okay for black. I think that, notice, the bishop is not there anymore. The terrible bishop, it's like, imagine if you had like a little boo-boo, a little wound somewhere, and all of a sudden it's out. How glad you are, right? You're happy. Same thing here. That bishop was so terrible. So, okay, now this move is too much. Right now I think, listen, when you play a move like this, then the e6 square looks really weak. And besides, what kind of bishop does white have? A light square bishop. Do you think that black needs even more light square pawns to be on the light squares? I don't think so. I think that maybe you want to put some on the dark squares. So, yeah, this move is a bit too ambitious, I think. This is a good move. The rook goes from nowhere to the file. Now all of a sudden that pawn on e6 needs some babysitting. That's true. And now you play the move king h1. I have to tell you that I didn't quite understand why. I'm not sure I understand exactly why we need to do that. Is it really that important to put the king on h1? I think it was, sometimes it's what we call in chess, at least I call in chess, a lazy move. It's like you play like a move because I don't know what to do, and therefore I'll just, let me just move my king to the corner, maybe it'll be safe there. But maybe I want to leave the king right here because I don't want to waste the tempo. So what will be a good move? What will be white's plan? Right now this bishop on c2 looks really, really sleepy. And the black king side looks a little loose. This is not a super strong pawn. This is not a super strong pawn. So I really want to play a move like this. Now, I don't know if I can do it right now. If I do it right now, he might just snack on it, take it, and then it's like, okay, and now what? What is my next trick? You know, if I try to attack the pawn on g6, then he always has stuff like rook f5. So I'm not 100% sure that this is a smart thing to do, although maybe even this is possible. Maybe now there's a way to play something like queen g3 or something like that. Maybe it's worth it, and then you somehow take the pawn later on. But I wouldn't even bother. I would just prepare it. So for example, maybe I can play a move like queen to f3 to throw in a move. And now I am ready to play the move g4. Let's say my opponent plays a move. Again, just to throw in a move. I'm not saying it's the best move, but let's say rook e7, g4. Now my position is improving. I'm pressuring it. If you take and I take back, the pawn on g6 is going to be very much in trouble. You won't be able to defend the pawn on g6, the one right next to the king, right here. So you cannot even take me. And if you can't take me, then it's great. I mean, I'm improving my position, I'm gaining space. At the right time, I want to take here, because every capture, and then of course I have another g-pawn. I have a second g-pawn to push when I need to. And that will make all those g-pawn pushes and captures are going to make my bishop on c2 look like it means something, right? Like it's a valuable piece. So, okay. So we had king h, oops, sorry. King h1, h5. Wow, all the black pawns are on light squares, just like the bishop hoped for them. Okay, so bishop d3. I guess the bishop is improving his position a little bit, okay. Bishop h6. I don't think this is the greatest move in the world because the queen has to move anyways. Queen e2. Again, I'm really thinking of playing a move like maybe queen f3. I like it kind of better. I like the queen to be in touch with more stuff in the center. And again, maybe my plan is going to be to try to push the pawn somehow. h3 and g4. For that sake, I'd rather have my king on g1. Okay, the game is not super exciting, but it got exciting. Okay, bishop back, who knows why. a4. That was a very, very brave decision, I think. I think that if you wanted to play a4, you could have done it, but maybe you could have prepared it as well. If you wanted to play the move a4, then I'm thinking that in this position, okay, maybe you could have played it right here instead of bishop d3. a4. Of course, I don't think you have any reason to be afraid of a capture because you just swing your rook back to here, and on your next move, that pawn on a4 is going bye-bye. So, yeah, so you could have done that probably under better circumstances. Okay, so we had this. He took, and you took, and he played queen d6. Okay, bishop b5, rook to a8, and now you took the pawn on e6. Yeah, why not? All of a sudden, all his pawn became a little vulnerable. And he traded and traded, rook here, attacking your bishop, bishop c6, rook a5, defending the pawn on d5. And so you said, okay, then I'm defending my pawn on b2. So there were a little fireworks. Both sides traded some shots. And in this position, I think that white is in really good shape, namely because he's up a pawn. And now we can see that all those pawns are on light squares. That means that they can be attacked. Okay, in this position he played here. Okay, probably the only move. I don't think he has anything else. I really like this move. Takes, and Of course, that was a little accident, right? That was a little problem. So could we have done something else in this position? What do you think would have been a good alternative to a3? First of all, I have to say that in this position, maybe in view of what happened, you could have played something else. But again, the a4 pawn for black, I think, is going to be too dangerous. So after this move here, oh, I was about to suggest a move, but now I'm thinking that it's really not that good. Oh, so maybe let's go back a little bit here. After this. Yes, Arjun?
I think my only move is rook b1.
But then he can still play a3.
Then I have b4.
And then he might play a2 and you'll play rook a1.
But that's better than...
I agree. Let's take a look at it. Yes, I'm definitely interested in looking at it. Let's put the rook here. I know it's a bit passive, but maybe this is the best way, because if you get mated, well, we know this is not ideal, right? So now, what can he do? He cannot attack you further. Your main idea right now is to play bishop to e8. Right? You want to play bishop e8, and then he has to kiss those pawns goodbye. Can you all see that? Bishop coming here, and the pawn on g6, and then all the black pawns are going to fall. So let's try this. And of course, we're going to play b4, very, very strong move. Not only saving the pawn, but at the same time, keeping an eye on the rook. Let's say he plays a2, we're going to play this move. And now I'm thinking to myself that white is again in good shape. Maybe this was the way to go. Probably black has only one move, he has to save his rook, so maybe rook a3, try to tickle the pawn, trying to tickle the pawn on c3, right? I want to try to take it. But at the same time, guess what? I will take the pawn on a2, but I don't want to get mated. So let's try to think, what can we do in this position? Can I play bishop e8, or am I going to be too late for this? I am not sure. I have to be really careful, because black's idea is to take the pawn on c3, then with the bishop take the pawn on d4, and then of course the queening square here could be lots and lots of trouble. So let's try to think, what is white's best move here? Yes?
Does black have b3 as another option here?
Say again, please?
Does black have rook b3 as another option here?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. But the thing is, my plan was to play bishop here, and in this case, I'm not worried about this, because I'm going to play check, king moves, and take, and I'm covering b1. See? Now I'm defending the b1 square with my bishop and with my rook, so I won 2 pawns, and I think that here I'm okay. But my concern was, in this variation, had I played this move, that he will take here. And now I'm not at liberty to take on a2 because rook c1 checkmate. And of course I can take these pawns, but the question is, by him keeping this, am I tempting fate a little bit? Is this too dangerous? You know, could this could be maybe too dangerous. So I think in this position, after this, maybe white has to do something. Can I defend all my stuff somehow though? I don't know that.
Bring the rook back.
But he's going to take on c3 and attack my bishop.
No, bring the rook back to e3.
No, I cannot play rook e3 because he's going to take on d4. And now there's a pin, you see?
Right.
If I take, he gets to take here. Yes?
I'm going to go back and refute. If I do rook b3 and you play bishop e1,
e8.
e8, I'm going to take rook take e8.
Well, I mean, I think it was me, you mean in this position? And here, you will take first on e8 here. If you play rook b3 here, you're too late, because I take both pawns.
Right, I think I can.
But if you take here, I was thinking about it, but I don't know, this is the variation that I said that it looks a little crazy. Take, giving up an exchange for the sake of playing here, but I think that I'm just in time to play this move.
I thought I had one.
And I think that somehow here I'm somehow alive. Not happily alive, but alive. Probably it's okay. So yeah, I mean, this is probably the Arjun, you're right, and rook b1. For better or for worse, you had to have tried it. And again, probably the continuation is forced. a2 here, here, and now, okay, I can play either one of those moves. So let's see, maybe I can play. well, can I play this move? Let's check it out. And then after rook here, play b5. So I'm saving my pawn and I'm saving my bishop at the same time. Of course, the question is, can he play bishop takes d4? And I'm thinking, okay, then I'll play rook takes a2. And I think that white is fine. Maybe not more than that, but white is fine. This position, I think that I'm able to defend everything. If you move this rook, then I'm just going to move my rook. So, quite a wild game, huh, Arjun? A wild game. Lots of opportunities, right, for both sides. Have you learned something from this game? Good. Did you guys understand that game more or less? Yeah? Okay. I think our time is just about up, and like we saw in the game, in the end, there was a bit of a, after this, well, didn't we take somehow? How did that happen? Oh, yeah, after this, here, yep. And so busy thinking about the queening and the pawns and the weaknesses, right, that you forgot that the king is a bit stuck.
I only saw the other rook on c1. I forgot about his rook on b8.
I see. So you forget that the rook can just go to the last rank. That happens. Okay, guys, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. Thank you.